Widow and her mother are evicted from their home, but destiny had something great in store for them. Sarah held the baby tightly as she watched the last of their belongings being thrown onto the dusty road. Her sister-in-law screamed that she couldn't stand supporting useless mouths on the property anymore, which no longer yielded enough even for her own family. "Take your junk and get out of here," shouted Maureen, the sister-in-law, throwing an old suitcase that burst open on the ground. "My brother is gone, and you are not part of this family." Sarah's mother-in-law, Mrs. Dorothy, 68 years old, held the donkey's reins with trembling hands. It was all that remained of the life they had built on the farm. The skinny animal carried sacks of clothes and a few kitchen utensils, the only possessions they managed to save from the eviction. "Maureen, for God's sake, where are we supposed to go with such a small child?" pleaded Mrs. Dorothy, pointing to her grandson of just 4 months in her daughter-in-law's arms. "That's not my problem. You have legs, use them," the woman replied, crossing her arms. "This land belongs to my children now." Sarah, 23 years old, felt her chest burn with anger and humiliation. Less than 6 months earlier, she had been happy beside her husband James, planning the future of their growing family. Now, a young widow with no resources, she faced the cruel reality of depending on others' goodwill. "Mother Dorothy, let's go," said Sarah, adjusting the baby in her arms. "We are no longer welcome here." The dirt road leading to the town of Hope Springs stretched for miles under the scorching sun of the Oklahoma backcountry. Sarah walked slowly, conserving her strength, while Mrs. Dorothy led the donkey loaded with their few belongings. The baby, baptized James in honor of his deceased father, slept soundly in his mother's arms. "Sarah, my dear, I need to tell you something," said Mrs. Dorothy after an hour of walking. "I have some money saved. It's not much, but it can help us for a few weeks." The young woman stopped walking and looked at her mother-in-law in surprise. "Saved money? Why did you never tell me before?" "It was for emergencies, and now the emergency has come," the older woman explained, pulling a yellowed envelope from inside her blouse. "It's $200 I saved by selling eggs and cheese hidden from Maureen." Sarah felt a mix of relief and worry. $200 wouldn't last long, but at least they could stay somewhere until they found work. "Thank you, Mother Dorothy. You've always thought of everything. Now we need to get to town quickly. This sun is too strong for the baby." Hope Springs was a small town with just over 15,000 inhabitants, located in the central region of Oklahoma. Its cobblestone streets and simple houses mainly welcomed families of rural workers and small merchants. Sarah knew the town by sight, as she used to come with her husband to sell farm products at the weekly market. Their first stop was the Central Boarding House, an old 2-story building in the center of town. The owner, Mrs. Edith, received the 2 women with suspicion. $50 a week per room, the woman informed them, looking at the baby with an unfriendly face. "I don't accept noise from a crying child. The other guests complain." Sarah did the math in her head. $100 a week would consume their savings in just 2 weeks. "Don't you have a cheaper little room?" "We are honest workers." "What I have available is this. Take it or leave it," replied Mrs. Edith, going back behind the counter. "We'll take it," whispered Mrs. Dorothy. "At least for now." The room was small and damp, with 2 single beds and an old wardrobe. Through the window they could see the backyard where Mrs. Edith raised chickens. Sarah settled the baby on one of the beds, using pillows to make an improvised barrier. "Sarah, tomorrow you go out to look for work." "I'll take James Jr.," said Mrs. Dorothy, sitting on the other bed. "But you've already done so much for us, you don't need to worry." "Nonsense, girl. We're family, and family helps each other in difficult times." The next morning, Sarah left the baby with her mother-in-law and went out into the streets of Hope Springs looking for work opportunities. The first stop was the municipal market, where she introduced herself to Mr. Joshua, the owner of a butcher shop. "I need someone to clean and organize. Pays $40 a week," offered the man, looking Sarah up and down. "I accept, Mr. Joshua. When can I start?" "Right now. But there's one condition. You can't bring a child. This is a workplace." Sarah felt her heart tighten. How would she leave the baby all day? "Mr. Joshua, I have a small baby. Isn't there any way I can bring him?" "No, there isn't. Either you accept the conditions or you look elsewhere. Discouraged, Sarah continued walking through the town. At St. Joseph's Bakery, the owner offered work in the early morning hours, from 2 to 6 a.m. "It's for making bread and cakes, pays $30 a week," explained Mr. Anthony. "And during the day, can I stay with my son?" "Yes, you can, but you have to be punctual. I don't accept absences or tardiness." Sarah accepted the job at the bakery. Even knowing it would be difficult to work all night and care for the baby during the day, it was better than having no income at all. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. In the first week of work, Sarah could barely sleep. She woke up at 2 in the morning, walked to the bakery, worked 4 hours making bread and cakes, returned to the central boarding house at 6:30, and still had to care for the baby who woke up to feed every 3 hours. "My dear, you look like you haven't slept in days," observed Mrs. Dorothy, worried about her daughter-in-law's deep, dark circles. "I'm fine, Mother Dorothy. It's just a matter of getting used to the schedule. This is no life for a young woman with a baby. You'll end up getting sick." But Sarah was stubborn and determined. She'd rather die of exhaustion than depend on the charity of others. During the day, while the baby slept, she still went out to look for extra work. She managed to wash clothes for 2 families in the neighborhood, earning another $20 a week. At the end of the first week at the boarding house, Mrs. Edith collected the rent with military punctuality. $100 for the 2 of you. And I want to let you know that starting next week, the price goes up to $60 per room. Sarah handed over the money with a heavy heart. Only $50 remained from her mother-in-law's savings, and with the rent increase, she would need $120 a week just to stay at the boarding house. "Mrs. Edith, why such a sudden increase?" asked Sarah. "Because I want to. My bills went up too. If you don't like it, find another place." That night, Sarah and Mrs. Dorothy did the math again. With the $50 from the bakery and $20 from the laundry, they had $70 in weekly income, not enough to pay rent, food, and other basic needs. "Sarah, we'll have to look for another place to live," said Mrs. Dorothy. "I've already asked at all the boarding houses in town. They all charge similar prices." "What if we seek help at the church?" Sarah made a face. Her pride as a working woman didn't sit well with the idea of asking for handouts. "We haven't reached that point yet, Mother Dorothy. My dear, pride doesn't put food on the table or pay the rent." The following Monday, Sarah woke up at 2 in the morning as usual, but this time she found the baby with a fever. The boy was crying non-stop and his forehead was too hot. "Mother Dorothy, wake up. James Jr. has a high fever." Mrs. Dorothy jumped out of bed and touched her grandson's forehead. "He really is hot. We need to take him to the doctor now." "But it's 2 in the morning. Where are we going to find a doctor at this hour?" "At the hospital. Come on, grab our things." At the municipal hospital in Hope Springs, a nurse attended to the baby after a 2-hour wait. "It's a respiratory infection. He needs antibiotics," the professional diagnosed. "Do you have a way to buy the medicine?" Sarah looked at Mrs. Dorothy, who shook her head. The $40 they had left wouldn't be enough to buy the medications. "How much does it cost us?" Sarah asked. "About $80 total." It was almost all the money they had. Sarah made the decision right then. "We'll buy it. My son's health comes first." With only $10 remaining, they returned to the boarding house where Sarah gave the baby the first dose of the medicine. But she knew she wouldn't have money even for the next week's rent, much less to buy food. "Mother Dorothy, now we really are going to have to seek help at the church." "It was about time, my child. There's no shame in asking for help when you need it." Father Anthony was a 50-year-old man who had led Our Lady of the Immaculate Conception Parish for more than a decade. Known for his charity and wisdom, he constantly received people in financial difficulty. "My child, I heard you're going through hard times," said the priest, inviting Sarah and Mrs. Dorothy to sit in his office. Sarah told the whole story, from being expelled from the farm to their current situation at the boarding house. The priest listened carefully, asking a few questions about the family and work. "I can help you in 2 ways, offered Father Anthony. "First, I'll pay for the baby's medicine and this week's rent. Second, I offer work here at the church for you." "What kind of work, Father?" Sarah can clean the church every morning before the 7 o'clock Mass. Mrs. Dorothy can help with the altar linens and organizing the sacristy. I'll pay $40 a week to each of you." It was the salvation they needed. $80 a week, plus the $50 from the bakery and $20 from the laundry, would total $150 weekly, enough to get by with dignity. "I accept, Father. Thank you very much for the opportunity. The condition is that Sarah works here from 5 to 7 in the morning before going to the bakery. Mrs. Dorothy can come whenever she wants during the day." Sarah started working at the church the following morning. She arrived at 5, cleaned the altar, swept the floor, arranged the pews, and fixed the flowers. It was 2 hours of hard work, but honest and well paid. While cleaning, Sarah found old documents forgotten in a drawer behind the altar. They were birth certificates, property deeds, and other papers yellowed with time. Curious, she took the documents to the priest. "Father Anthony, I found these papers during the cleaning. What should I do with them?" The priest examined the documents with interest. "These are very old papers, from families who lived here decades ago. Many left the region during the Great Drought of 1998 and never returned to claim their properties." Sarah looked at the papers more closely. One name caught her attention: Sylvester Mitchell. "Father, this Sylvester Mitchell was a common name in my family. My mother always spoke of a grandfather with that name." "Interesting. This document here mentions a plot of land in New Village on the outskirts of town. According to the deed, the land was purchased in 1985 and was never sold." Sarah's heart raced. Could it be possible that her family had a right to that property? "What do I need to do to find out if I have a right to this land?" "You need to find a lawyer and present documents that prove your kinship with this Sylvester. I know an honest lawyer who can help. Dr. Benjamin, from the office near the square here." "Doctor." Benjamin Foster was a 40-year-old lawyer, a graduate of Oklahoma State University, who maintained a modest office in downtown Hope Springs. Known for helping humble people, he did not charge upfront fees from those who couldn't afford to pay. "Let's look at these documents," said Dr. Benjamin, putting on his glasses to examine the papers Sarah had found. After a few minutes of analysis, the lawyer confirmed that it was indeed a land deed from 1985. "This document appears authentic, but for you to have a right to the inheritance, you need to prove you are the granddaughter of this Sylvester Mitchell. How do I do that? You need your mother's birth certificate, your parents' marriage certificate, your own birth certificate, and if possible, your grandfather's death certificate." Sarah felt discouragement take over. She had none of those documents. When she married James, she took only the basic documents to the farm, and during the eviction, she couldn't retrieve anything. "Dr. Benjamin, I don't have any of those papers. I lost everything when I was evicted from the farm." "Calm down, don't be discouraged. We can request copies of all the documents from the registry offices. It will take work and cost some money, but it's possible." "How much money?" "To get all the certificates we need, about $200. My fees I only charge if we manage to recover the land. Then you pay me 10% of the value we get." $200 was a lot of money for Sarah, but Mrs. Dorothy had an idea. "Sarah, let's sell the donkey. He's old and can't carry weight like before. With the money from the sale, we pay for the documents." It was a difficult decision. The donkey was the last memory of the late James and represented transportation independence. But it was also the only chance to perhaps recover a piece of land that could change their lives. "All right, Mother Dorothy, let's sell Thunder." Thunder was the donkey's name. Baptized by James when he was still young, the animal was 12 years old and showed signs of tiredness, but was still good for light work. Sarah managed to sell him to a local farmer for $180. With the money in hand, Sarah and Mrs. Dorothy began the pilgrimage to the region's registry offices. First, they went to the Hope Springs registry office to request Sarah's birth certificate. Then they took a bus to the neighboring town where Sarah was born to get her mother's certificate. The bus trip cost $20 and took 3 hours. At the registry office, they discovered they also needed the marriage certificate of Sarah's parents, which required another trip to a third town. "Dr. Benjamin, this is turning out more complicated than we imagined," complained Sarah during a consultation. "We've already spent almost all the money on travel and registry fees." "It's normal, Sarah. Inheritance matters are always bureaucratic, but we are on the right track. We've already gotten 4 of the 5 documents we need. The last necessary document was Sylvester's death certificate, which, according to church records, had died in 1999 in the city of Tulsa, another expensive trip that consumed the family's last resources. While they waited for the documentation to be complete, Sarah continued working at the church and the bakery, while Mrs. Dorothy took care of the baby, who was now completely healed from the respiratory infection. The routine was tiring, but at least they had a clear goal: to prove their right to the land. 2 weeks later, Dr. Benjamin called Sarah for an important meeting. "Sarah, I have good and bad news about the land," said the lawyer with a serious expression. "I'd rather hear the bad news first. The land really does belong to your family. You are the legitimate heir of Sylvester Mitchell. But there's a problem. The land is occupied." "Occupied by whom?" "By 3 families who built shacks on the site about 5 years ago. Legally, you can evict them, but it will be a very complicated situation." Sarah felt her stomach churn. She had just discovered she was going to put other families in the same situation she had been through. And the good news? The land is located in an area that is appreciating in value. The City Hall has urbanization plans for that region. If you can find a solution for the families living there, you could turn this into a good business. What kind of solution? That's for you to decide. You can negotiate with them, you can propose some kind of partnership, or you can simply exercise your legal rights and reclaim the land. Sarah asked for a few days to think. The situation was delicate and required a careful decision. During a conversation with Mrs. Dorothy, an unexpected idea came up. "Sarah, what if you talk to these families? Maybe you can work together instead of fighting over the land." "How do you mean, Mother Dorothy?" "I don't know. Do something together. A garden, some kind of business. You've always been good with plants." The idea seemed crazy, but Sarah decided to meet the families occupying her land before taking any legal action. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out, now continuing. The land was in New Village, a neighborhood on the outskirts of Hope Springs, where mostly low-income families lived. It was a plot of about 2,000 square meters, with fertile soil and access to water from an artesian well dug by the occupants themselves. Sarah arrived at the location accompanied by Mrs. Dorothy and baby James. The 3 shacks were simple but well kept, with small backyards where the families grew vegetables and raised chickens. The first person they met was Joan, a 40-year-old woman who lived there with 2 teenage children. "Are you looking for someone?" asked Joan suspiciously. "I'm Sarah. I came to talk about the land." Joan's face immediately tensed up. "Oh, you're the owner of the land the lawyer mentioned. Did you come to evict us?" "I didn't come to evict anyone. I came to talk." Joan called the neighbors, and soon Sebastian, a 50-year-old man who worked as a bricklayer, and Lucy, a 60-year-old woman who cared for 4 grandchildren, appeared. "Look, Mrs. Sarah," said Sebastian, "we know you have the legal right to the land, but we've built our lives here. My children go to the neighborhood school. My wife works nearby." "We don't want to cause problems for anyone," explained Sarah, "but we also need a place to live and work." Lucy, who had been quiet until then, approached Sarah. "Young lady, you look like someone who's suffered in life. We've suffered a lot too. How about we talk calmly and see if we can find a good solution for everyone?" Sarah accepted the invitation to sit in the shade of a mango tree growing in the center of the land. There, each family told their story. Joan was a widow and worked as a house cleaner to support her children. Sebastian had lost his bricklayer job during the pandemic and now did odd jobs. Lucy cared for her motherless grandchildren after her daughter had died of cancer. "Do you grow anything here?" asked Sarah, observing the small garden beds in the yards. "We grow food to eat," replied Lucy. "Lettuce, tomatoes, cilantro, things like that. The soil here is good and there's water from the well." Sarah had an idea. "What if we turned this into a larger garden to sell at the city market?" "How do you mean?" asked Sebastian. "I know about farming. I learned on my late husband's farm. You know the local market. We could work together, share the profits and the land." Joan and Sebastian exchanged suspicious glances. You're saying this so you don't have to evict us, and then you'd change your mind. We could make a contract with Dr. Benjamin, official, notarized. Each family gets a portion of the land to live on, and we use the rest for the community garden. Lucy liked the idea immediately. That makes sense. Everyone wins, and girl, you seem like good people. But Sebastian still had doubts. And who's going to cover the costs? Seeds, fertilizer, tools? Sarah didn't have an answer for that. Her resources were far too limited to invest in a large garden. Let's talk to Dr. Benjamin about the legal possibilities. If the idea is viable, we'll figure out the money. Dr. Benjamin found the proposal interesting, but warned of the risks. Sarah, it's a beautiful idea, but a complicated one. You would be giving up part of your rights to the land. If it fails, you could lose everything. And if it succeeds? If it succeeds, it could be very profitable. The demand for organic products is growing in the region, but it needs a very detailed contract. Sarah decided to bet on the partnership. For a week, she and Dr. Benjamin drafted a contract that defined the responsibilities of each family, the division of profits, and the rules for living together on the land. The contract stated that each occupying family would have the right to build a permanent house on an area of 200 square meters. The remaining 1,400 square meters would be designated for the community garden, managed jointly by the 4 families. The profits from the sale of the produce would be divided proportionally to each person's work. 30% for Sarah, who would be the technical coordinator, 25% for Sebastian, responsible for structure and maintenance, 25% for Joan, in charge of sales and business contacts, and 20% for Lucy, who would handle the preparation and preservation of the products. Mrs. Dorothy would be responsible for the venture's accounting and financial control. Mother Dorothy, are you sure you want to be involved in this? Asked Sarah. Girl, at 68, I still have a lot to contribute, and I like to feel useful. With the contract signed, the hardest phase began, turning the idea into reality. Sarah quit her job at the bakery to dedicate herself fully to the garden project. It was a calculated risk, as she would lose the fixed income of $50 a week, but she would gain time to make the garden work. The first challenge was getting money to buy seeds, tools, and irrigation materials. Sarah remembered her conversation with Mrs. Helen, one of the women for whom she washed clothes weekly. Mrs. Helen was the wife of a prosperous merchant in town and always praised Sarah's work. Mrs. Helen, can I talk to you about a project? Of course, Sarah. What do you have in mind? Sarah explained the whole situation, the inheritance of the land, the partnership with the occupying families, and the plans for the community garden. It's an interesting project, said Mrs. Helen, but how much money do you need? To start, about $500, to buy seeds, some basic tools, and set up a simple irrigation system. Mrs. Helen talked to her husband, Mr. Raymond, who decided to invest in the project. Sarah, I'll lend you the $500 interest-free. You pay me back as the garden starts making a profit. But I want one condition. What condition, Mr. Raymond? I want priority in buying your products. My supermarket chain can be your first customer. It was better than Sarah had hoped. Not only did she get the startup money, but she also secured a buyer for the garden's produce. With the investment in hand, Sarah and her partners began working on the land. Sebastian used his experience as a bricklayer to drill wells and set up the irrigation structure. Joan researched prices and suppliers for seeds and seedlings. Lucy prepared the beds, drawing on her experience with medicinal plants. Sarah coordinated everything, applying knowledge she had acquired on her late husband's farm. She knew which crops adapted best to the region's climate and how to organize planting to have production year-round. The work was hard, especially in the Oklahoma heat, but everyone was motivated by the possibility of building something of their own. Sarah took baby James to the plot every day, and soon the other neighborhood children began to show up too, turning the place into a community gathering space. 3 months after work began, the garden started to yield its first results. Lettuce, arugula, cherry tomatoes, cilantro, parsley, and bell peppers grew in the well-organized beds. The quality of the produce caught the attention of Mrs. Helen, who decided to expand the partnership. Sarah, your vegetables are excellent. I want to buy everything you can produce, and I can recommend you to other merchants. The first sale brought in $250, which were divided according to the contract. Sarah received $75, enough to buy food for a week and still invest in new seeds. But success also brought new challenges. Demand for the products grew quickly, requiring more labor and investment in equipment. Sarah realized she would need technical help to expand production without compromising quality. It was then that she met agronomist Charles, a technician from the Municipal Department of Agriculture who visited small rural producers. "Sarah, you're doing interesting work here," said Charles, examining the beds. "With some technical improvements, you could triple production." "What kind of improvements?" "A composting system for organic fertilizer, planned crop rotation, biological pest control. I can guide you free of charge." Charles's technical guidance brought impressive results. In 6 months, the garden's production had increased fourfold, and the products were recognized for their quality throughout the region. Sarah managed to pay off her loan with Mr. Raymond and even invest in building a small house on the property. Mrs. Dorothy, who had moved to a rented room near the garden, watched her grandson James grow, who was now crawling between the beds. But not everything was rosy in the community enterprise. Relationship problems began to arise among the partners. Sebastian complained that he worked more hours than the others, but received the same percentage of the profits. Joan argued that she secured the best sale prices and deserved an extra commission. Lucy felt undervalued because her work was considered less important. "Dr. Benjamin, we're having some friction in the partnership," Sarah confided during a consultation. "How do we resolve this without dissolving the partnership?" "It's normal. Every partnership goes through moments like this. The important thing is to sit down and talk honestly. Perhaps it's time to revise the contract." Sarah called a general meeting to discuss the problems. The conversation was tense, with each person airing their complaints and frustrations. "Sebastian, you're right," admitted Sarah. "You are working more hours than all of us. How about we adjust the profit sharing according to each person's hours worked?" "And me, who gets the best prices?" questioned Joan. "You can receive a 2% commission on sales, in addition to your regular share." "And me?" asked Lucy. "You are fundamental to the quality of the products. Without your care, we wouldn't have this reputation in the market." After 2 hours of discussion, they reached a new agreement that satisfied everyone. The contract was reformulated, establishing fairer criteria for profit sharing and responsibilities. The crisis strengthened the partnership, and the following months were the garden's most productive. Sarah invested in new crops, like aromatic herbs and medicinal plants, which had higher added value. 1 year after the project began, the new village community garden was a reference throughout the region. It produced organic food for 5 supermarkets, 3 restaurants, and the municipal market in Hope Springs. Sarah had become a respected small rural entrepreneur, often invited to speak about urban agriculture and cooperativism in other cities. Mrs. Dorothy, proud of her daughter-in-law, took care of her grandson James, who now walked alone among the plants. But the success also attracted the attention of ill-intentioned people. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we are just starting out. Now continuing. Mr. Gerald was a real estate speculator known in the region for buying land in areas that were appreciating. When he learned of the community garden's success, he sought out Sarah with a tempting proposal. "Sarah, I heard you turned that land into a prosperous business," said the man, wearing a suit and tie even in the heat of the countryside. "That's right, Mr. Gerald. With a lot of hard work and dedication, I have a proposal that might interest you. I want to buy the land. I'll pay $50,000 cash." Sarah almost choked. $50,000 was more money than she had ever seen in her entire life. $50,000? Cash, money on the table. You could buy a house in the city and still have money left to invest in other businesses. "And what do you intend to do with the land?" "That doesn't matter. What matters is that you'll become rich." Sarah asked for time to think about the proposal, but she knew that accepting would mean destroying the community project and leaving the other families homeless again. During a meeting with the partners, she told them about Mr. Gerald's offer. $50,000 is a lot of money, commented Sebastian. It would allow each of us to buy a decent house. "But what about the work we built here?" asked Lucy. "And our jobs?" "I can find work somewhere else," said Joan. $50,000 divided by 4 gives over $12,000 for each. Sarah found herself torn between immediate financial security and the long-term project that had taken root in the community. "I'll talk to Dr. Benjamin about the legal aspects of the sale," decided Sarah. Dr. Benjamin explained that Sarah had the legal right to sell the land, but would need to compensate the partners for their investments and improvements. "Sarah, financially, it's an advantageous offer, but you need to think beyond the money. What legacy do you want to leave for your son?" "How so?" "James is growing up here, seeing you build something important for the community. If you sell everything for money, what lesson will you be teaching him?" This reflection deeply moved Sarah. She remembered the day she was expelled from the farm by her greedy sister-in-law and how much that had hurt her. That night, Sarah walked alone through the garden, observing the plants she had cared for with such affection. Baby James slept in his grandmother Dorothy's arms, who was knitting on the porch of the small but cozy house they had built. "Mother Dorothy, what would you do in my place?" "My dear, money gets spent and runs out, but what you've built here will last forever, even if you are no longer here to see it." "But $50,000 would change our lives completely." "Our lives have already changed completely. A year ago, we were on the road with just a bag of clothes. Today, you have a thriving business, your own home, true friends, and a guaranteed future for your son." Mrs. Dorothy was right. Sarah realized that true wealth wasn't measured by the amount of money in the bank, but by the life she had built through honest work and cooperation with others. The next morning, Sarah called Mr. Gerald. "Thank you for the offer, but I'm not interested in selling the land." "You're making a mistake, Sarah. I can increase the offer to $60,000. "It's not about the money. It's about principles." Mr. Gerald didn't give up easily. He began spreading rumors that the garden was polluting the local soil and that the families were living there illegally. He even went to the city hall to complain about the situation. The mayor of Hope Springs, however, was familiar with the community garden's work and supported the project. "Sarah, Mr. Gerald came here with complaints about you all," the mayor said during a visit to the site. "But I told him you are an example of entrepreneurship for the entire town. Thank you for your support, Mr. Mayor. Actually, I came here to make a proposal. The city wants to include you in the Municipal Urban Agriculture Program. This means technical and financial support to expand the project." The municipal program offered $10,000 in funding for structural improvements, permanent technical assistance, and a guarantee to purchase part of the produce for the school lunch program. Sarah agreed to participate in the program, which gave the project even more credibility. The community garden began receiving visitors from other towns interested in replicating the experience. Mary Beth, an agriculture professor from a state university, organized student field trips to see the work being done in New Village. "Sarah, you've created a model of sustainable development that should be copied across the country," praised the professor. "Professor, all we did was work honestly and respect each other." "Exactly, and that is rarer than you think." The academic recognition brought new opportunities. Sarah was invited to speak at urban agriculture conferences, earning extra income as a consultant for other similar projects. 2 years after the community garden started, Sarah had become a regional reference in cooperative agriculture. The land's production supported 15 families directly, among the original partners and employees hired as the business grew. Sebastian built a 2-bedroom house for his family and invested in irrigation and organic farming courses. Joan opened a small market at the entrance to New Village, specializing in organic products. Lucy developed a line of dehydrated seasonings that were sold in specialty stores in the region. Mrs. Dorothy, now 70 years old, had become the respected matriarch of the community, caring not only for her grandson James, but also guiding other children and families who had moved near the garden. James, now 3 years old, was growing up free and healthy, talking about plants and animals with the ease of someone born in the countryside. Sarah often watched him playing in the dirt and thought about how life had changed since that terrible day of eviction from the farm. But life always holds surprises, and not all of them are pleasant. One morning, Sarah received an unexpected visit. Maureen, the sister-in-law who had evicted her and Mrs. Dorothy from the farm years before. "Sarah, I need to talk to you," said Maureen, visibly embarrassed. "What do you want here?" "I came to apologize for what I did to you, and I came to ask for help." Sarah looked at her sister-in-law with suspicion. Maureen was thinner and looked tired, very different from the arrogant woman who had humiliated them. "What kind of help?" "The farm went bankrupt. We lost everything. My children are in need, and I have nowhere to go." Mrs. Dorothy, who had been listening to the conversation, approached the two women. "Maureen, what happened to the farm?" "After you left, I couldn't manage on my own. The bills piled up, production fell, the banks foreclosed on the mortgage. Now we're on the street just like you were." Sarah felt a mix of satisfaction and pity. On one hand, there was a certain justice in the fact that Maureen was facing the same hardships she had caused them. On the other hand, she saw children in need because of the adults' mistakes. "And what do you expect me to do?" "I don't know. Maybe a job at the garden? I can work at anything." Mrs. Dorothy touched Sarah's arm. "My child, remember when we were on the road with nowhere to go? Someone helped us when we needed it most." Sarah knew her mother-in-law was right, but her wounded pride still ached. Maureen had been cruel and humiliating. Why should she help her now? "Maureen, you threw me out of the house when I was pregnant with a newborn baby. You said we weren't family." "I know, Sarah, I was very cruel. I was afraid I couldn't support my own children and ended up being unfair to you. And now you want me to forget all that?" "I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking for a chance to show I've changed." Sarah looked at James, who was playing nearby without understanding the adults' conversation. She thought about how she wanted her son to grow up, with resentment and a thirst for revenge, or with generosity and the capacity to forgive. "All right, Maureen, I can give you work at the garden, but with clear conditions." "Any conditions. I just need a chance." "You'll work like everyone else, with no special treatment for being family. You'll receive the same wage we pay the other workers, and if you cause any trouble, you leave that same day." "I accept everything." Maureen started working at the garden the following week. It was hard work, very different from the housewife life she had led on the farm, but she showed dedication and humility, traits Sarah hadn't imagined her sister-in-law possessed. Over time, Maureen managed to rent a small house in New Village and bring her children to live with her. The children adapted well to their new life and soon became friends with James and the other children in the community. Maureen's presence also brought an important family reconciliation. Mrs. Dorothy, who missed her other grandchildren, could spend time with them regularly again. The family, which had disintegrated through greed and misunderstanding, began to rebuild on more solid foundations. Sarah realized that forgiving Maureen had been more liberating for herself than for her sister-in-law. Carrying resentment and a desire for revenge was a burden not worth sustaining. 5 years after being expelled from the farm, Sarah had built a prosperous and happy life. The community garden employed 25 people directly and supplied products to the entire region. James was growing up healthy and smart, attending a private school that Sarah could afford with the business profits. Mrs. Dorothy, at 73, was fulfilled seeing the family reunited and prosperous. Maureen had become a better person through work and the difficulties she faced. The land, originally worth about $20,000, was now valued at over $200,000 due to the improvements and the established business. But Sarah no longer thought about selling. That place had become her true home. One day, while watching James play with his cousins among the flower beds, Sarah reflected on the extraordinary journey she had lived. She had started as a desperate widow with no prospects and had become a respected rural entrepreneur and a community leader. But more important than the financial success was the human legacy she was building. James was growing up seeing the importance of honest work, cooperation, and forgiveness. The other children in the community saw the garden as an example of how it's possible to prosper through collective effort. Sarah also never forgot the people who helped her in the most difficult times. Father Anthony continued to be a counselor and friend to the family. Dr. Benjamin had become a partner in the venture, offering legal advice in exchange for a small share of the profits. Mrs. Helen and Mr. Raymond maintained their commercial partnership and had become personal friends. The story of the community garden began to inspire other similar initiatives in neighboring towns. Sarah was often invited for consulting, becoming a recognized expert in cooperative urban agriculture. One morning, Sarah received an unexpected phone call. "Sarah, this is journalist Charles Edward from the Northeast Network Television. We would like to do a story about your community garden." "A story on television?" "Yes, your story is circulating on social media and caught our attention. It's an inspiring example of overcoming adversity and social entrepreneurship." The story aired on the region's highest-rated program, telling Sarah's story from the eviction from the farm to the current success of the community garden. The program generated thousands of positive comments and dozens of invitations for lectures and consultations. Sarah became famous overnight, but she didn't let that change her personality. She continued to wake up early to tend to the plants, participating in community meetings and prioritizing her son's education. The success also brought some temptations. A multinational agribusiness company offered $2 million to buy the usage rights for the New Village Community Garden brand and replicate the model on an industrial scale. "Sarah, it's a unique opportunity," argued the company representative. "You could expand the project across the entire country, but while maintaining the community and cooperative characteristics. Well, some adaptations would be necessary to make it economically viable." Sarah suspected that adaptations meant turning a social project into a purely profit-driven business, eliminating the cooperative aspect that was fundamental to the initiative's success. "Thank you for the proposal, but I'm not interested. I can increase it to $3 million. It's not a question of money. Our project is not for sale." The refusal of the $1 million offer reinforced the community's respect for Sarah. Everyone understood she was genuinely committed to cooperative values, not just personal profit. James, now 6 years old, began to show a genuine interest in agriculture. Sarah taught him about plants and soil in her spare time, passing on knowledge she had acquired over the years. "Mommy, when I grow up, I want to work in the garden too," the boy said one day. "You can work at whatever you want, my son, but it's good to know you'll always have a place here if you need it." Mrs. Dorothy, observing the conversation, smiled with pride. She had lived long enough to see 3 generations of the family overcome adversity through work and unity. The garden continued to grow and modernize. Sarah invested in sustainable technologies like solar energy, automated composting, and a smart irrigation system. But she always maintained the community-based and participatory character that was the hallmark of the project. 10 years after the eviction from the farm, Sarah had built much more than she ever imagined possible. The community garden employed 50 people, directly and indirectly benefited hundreds of families in the region. The project inspired the creation of a network of community gardens in 15 towns in the interior of Oklahoma. Sarah coordinated the network, offering training and consulting for new ventures. James was growing into a polite, intelligent, and socially conscious boy. She spoke fluently about sustainable agriculture and cooperativism, impressing adults with her precocious knowledge of environmental and social issues. Maureen had become one of the most dedicated workers in the garden and a completely transformed person. Adversity had taught her values of humility and solidarity that she did not possess when she was the farm owner. Mrs. Dorothy, at 80 years old, remained active and sharp, consulted by the entire community on important matters. She was considered the matriarch not only of the family, but of all New Village. A special event marked the 10th anniversary of the community garden. The City Hall organized a celebration with the presence of state and federal authorities, hailing the project as a national model for sustainable rural development. "Sarah," said the State Secretary of Agriculture during his speech, "you have proven that it is possible to reconcile economic prosperity with social justice and environmental sustainability." During the celebration, Sarah had a moment of reflection as she observed the crowd celebrating on the land that a decade earlier was just a distant dream. Hundreds of people were there, garden workers with their families, business partners, authorities, journalists, and residents of New Village. James, now 10 years old, moved through the party explaining to visitors how the composting and irrigation system worked. Mrs. Dorothy received congratulations and thanks, from people who had been helped by the garden's work. Maureen helped with organizing the event, demonstrating the personal transformation she had undergone through honest work and community life. "Mother Dorothy," said Sarah, approaching her mother-in-law, "we did it, didn't we?" "Did what, my dear?" "Build something beautiful and lasting, something that will continue to exist even after we are no longer here." "Ah, my dear, we achieved that from the very first day we decided not to give up on the road. The rest was a consequence." Sarah hugged her mother-in-law, feeling profound gratitude for all the wisdom and support she had received throughout the journey. The celebration continued into the late hours, but Sarah left early to put James to bed. In the boys' room, decorated with drawings of plants and animals, mother and son talked before sleep. "Mommy, do you think I'll be able to take care of the garden when I grow up?" asked James. "My son, you can do anything you dream of, but if you choose to care for the garden, I will pass everything on to you with great pride. I want to learn everything about plants and soil. Then we'll keep studying together. But remember, the most important thing isn't the plants, it's the people who work with us." James fell asleep, dreaming of flower beds and people working happily together. Sarah stayed a few minutes watching her son sleep, thinking about how life had generously rewarded her decision not to give up in the face of adversity. 15 years after being expelled from the farm, Sarah was recognized as one of the leading figures in community agriculture in the Northeast. She had written 2 books on rural cooperativism and gave lectures at universities in Brazil and abroad, but she never abandoned direct work with the land. Every morning, before any professional commitment, she spent 2 hours tending to the flower beds and talking with the garden workers. James, now a 15-year-old teenager, alternated regular studies with practical learning in agriculture. He had developed a research project on traditional medicinal plants of the backcountry, winning awards at state science fairs. Mrs. Dorothy, at 85 years old, remained a respected advisor, though with less physical energy for intense activities. She spent her afternoons telling stories to the village children and knitting little clothes for the community's babies. Maureen had married again and built a stable life. Her children, now adults, worked in different sectors of the local economy, but maintained close ties with the new village community. The original community garden had become the center of an economic complex that included food processing, an organic products store, a rural restaurant, and a training center for sustainable agriculture. The project directly employed 120 people and generated indirect income for more than 300 families in the region. The annual revenue exceeded $2 million, but the profits were reinvested in the project's expansion and in social benefits for the community. Sarah never accepted offers to sell or partner with large corporations. She maintained the original commitment to cooperative values and sustainable local development. During an interview for a national magazine, the journalist asked about the secrets of the project's success. "Sarah, what's the magic formula that made your community garden prosper when so many other similar projects failed?" "There is no magic formula. There is honest work, mutual respect, and long-term commitment. The difference is that we weren't seeking quick enrichment, but building a dignified life for everyone involved." "And you never regretted turning down million-dollar offers to sell?" "Never. Money is important, but it's not everything. We built here much more than a profitable business. We built a prosperous and happy community." The interview was republished in dozens of media outlets, inspiring new cooperative projects across the country. James, who followed the interview, felt proud hearing his mother speak about the values that guided her life. "Mommy, I want to be like you when I grow up." "My son, be better than me. You have educational opportunities and knowledge that I didn't have. Use that to do even more good for people." "I'm already thinking about studying agronomy at the state university." "Excellent idea. With a higher technical education, you can take our project to an even higher level." 20 years after the eviction from the farm, Sarah celebrated her 50th birthday, surrounded by a prosperous family and a flourishing community. The birthday party gathered more than 500 people at the community garden complex. James, now 20 years old and an agronomy student, had become his mother's right hand in managing the project. He showed a natural talent for leadership and technological innovation. Mrs. Dorothy, at 90 years old, remained surprisingly active and lucid. She was seen as one of the wisest and most respected women in the region, often sought for advice and conflict mediation. The Community Garden Project had inspired the creation of a network of over 100 similar enterprises across the Northeast. Sarah coordinated the network through a non-governmental organization she had founded, with support from universities and government agencies. During the birthday party, Sarah received a special tribute from the City Hall. The main street of New Village was officially named Sarah Mitchell Street, in recognition of her contribution to local development. "Sarah," said the mayor during the ceremony, "you transformed not only your own life, but the lives of thousands of people in our region. You are an example of how determination and honest work can overcome any adversity." During her thank you speech, Sarah remembered the journey traveled since that terrible day of the eviction from the farm. "Friends, 20 years ago, I was just a desperate widow with a baby in my arms and no prospects for the future. Today I am here surrounded by a wonderful family and a prosperous community. This was only possible because I never gave up, even in the most difficult moments. And especially because I found generous people who helped me when I needed it most." The speech moved everyone present. Many of the oldest employees of the garden had tears in their eyes as they remembered the difficult early days and compared them to the current prosperity. James also gave a speech, thanking his mother for creating an environment where he could grow up surrounded by solid values and learning opportunities. "Mum, thank you for teaching me that wealth isn't measured only in money, but in the quality of the relationships we build and the good we do for other people." Mrs. Dorothy, invited to close the ceremony, summarized the philosophy that had guided the family for 2 decades. "My dears, I've learned in this life that God always prepares good surprises for those who don't give up in difficult times." Sarah and James suffered greatly, but they never lost faith in hard work and in the goodness of people. That's why they deserve all the happiness they've achieved. The party continued into the early morning, with music, dancing, and lots of food produced in the garden itself. It was a celebration not only of Sarah's birthday, but of the entire community project that had transformed a peripheral area into an example of sustainable development. 25 years after being expelled from the farm, Sarah had become a respected public figure across the country. Her autobiography, titled From the Road to Prosperity, became a national bestseller, inspiring millions of people facing economic and social difficulties. James, with a degree in agronomy specializing in sustainable agriculture, gradually took over the administration of the community garden, allowing Sarah to dedicate herself more to consulting and motivational speaking. The young man brought important technological innovations to the project, such as an automated irrigation system controlled by an app and an online marketplace for direct sales to consumers. But he always respected the cooperative and community values established by his mother. Mrs. Dorothy, at 95 years old, remained the venerated matriarch of the community. Although physically more fragile, she kept a sharp mind and continued to be consulted on important decisions. The community garden had expanded to an area of 5 hectares, employing 200 people directly and benefiting over 1,000 families in the region. The annual revenue exceeded $10 million, but it continued to be reinvested in social and environmental improvements. Sarah received various national and international awards for her work, including an honorable mention from the United Nations for her contribution to sustainable development. But the recognition that made her most proud was the affection and respect shown by the residents of New Village. To them, Sarah wasn't a celebrity, but a beloved neighbor who had changed their lives for the better. During an interview for an international documentary about cooperativism, Sarah reflected on the factors she considered fundamental to the project's success. First, never lose sight of the fact that we are working with people, not just with numbers and profits. Second, always reinvest the results in improving the community. Third, maintain humility and a willingness to learn even after achieving recognition. "And what advice would you give to women who are going through difficulties similar to those you faced?" asked the journalist. "I would say don't give up even when everything seems impossible. Seek help when necessary, work with honesty, and above all, don't be afraid to dream big. Sometimes the greatest adversities can be the beginning of the greatest opportunities. The documentary was shown in more than 30 countries, spreading Sarah's story around the world. Dozens of similar projects were created, inspired by the experience of the New Village Community Garden. James, now 25 and married to Claire, an environmental engineer he met at university, continued expanding and modernizing the family project. The couple had taken over leadership of the non-governmental organization founded by Sarah, bringing the cooperative methodology to other regions of the country. Sarah, at 55, began dividing her time between work in the garden and the education of her first grandson, Peter, son of James and Claire. The baby was growing up in the same community environment that had shaped his father's character, surrounded by plants, animals, and people from different social backgrounds. Mrs. Dorothy, a centenarian and still lucid, was revered as the grandmother of the entire community. Her stories about the past and life advice were recorded by James in a family memoir book. Maureen, now a grandmother too, worked as a quality supervisor in the garden and coordinated a social project for skills training for women in vulnerable situations. The community garden complex had become a regional tourist destination, receiving thousands of visitors annually interested in learning about the sustainable development model created by Sarah and her team. During a ceremony commemorating the project's 30th anniversary, Sarah was surprised with a special tribute, the inauguration of a cooperative agriculture research center that would bear her name. "Sarah," said the dean of the state university during the ceremony, "this research center will study and disseminate rural cooperative methodologies based on the pioneering experience you developed here in New Village. Professor, I am honored by this tribute, but I want the center to always be an open space for all who wish to learn and contribute to sustainable rural development." James, as executive director of the family's non-governmental organization, signed a technical cooperation agreement with the research center, ensuring an exchange of knowledge and experiences. During the ceremony, Sarah had a moment of deep emotion as she observed the crowd celebrating the project. She saw familiar faces of people she had helped over the years, young people who had grown up in the community and were now skilled professionals, entire families that had prospered through cooperative work. Peter, her 5-year-old grandson, was playing among the plants with other children from the community, representing the 4th generation of the family growing up in that environment of cooperation and prosperity. "Grandma Sarah," said Peter, running to hug her, "when I grow up, I want to take care of the little plants too. My little grandson, you can do whatever you want in life, but if you choose to care for the plants, you'll have a lot to learn. Will you teach me?" "Of course I'll teach you, just like my mother-in-law taught me and your daddy learned from me." The conversation with her grandson made Sarah reflect on the importance of passing values between generations. She had managed not only to prosper economically, but to create a legacy of honest work and social solidarity that would span decades. Mrs. Dorothy, observing the scene from afar, smiled with satisfaction. At 102, she had lived long enough to see 4 generations of the family prosper through the values she had helped plant. That night, after the ceremony, Sarah walked alone through the garden under the light of the full moon. The plants swayed gently in the night breeze, and the scent of flowers filled the air with a sweet, relaxing fragrance. She remembered the day, more than 3 decades earlier, when she walked down that same road carrying baby James in her arms, without prospects and without hope. Now she walked through the property she had built with her own hands, surrounded by a prosperous and happy community. The journey had been long and difficult, full of obstacles and moments of discouragement. But each challenge overcome had strengthened her determination and expanded her capacity to help others. Sarah returned home, where she found Mrs. Dorothy still awake, knitting a small blanket for the great-grandchild who was about to be born. "Mother Dorothy, don't you sleep? Sometimes I like to stay awake thinking about life. And you, what were you doing out there? Remembering how we got here. And what do you conclude? That every tear, every sleepless dawn, every moment of uncertainty was worth it. We built something beautiful and lasting." My daughter, the most beautiful part is not what we built, but how we built it, with honesty, hard work, and love for others. You're right, as always. The two women talked until the late hours, sharing memories and dreams for the future. It was a moment of family intimacy that sealed 3 decades of partnership and complicity. 35 years after being expelled from the farm, Sarah was celebrating her 60th birthday, surrounded by 5 generations of the family. The great-grandson, also named James, in honor of his great-grandfather, was crawling through the flower beds under the watchful eye of his centenarian great-grandmother. The community garden project had become a social empire that directly benefited 5,000 people in the region. James, now 30 years old and a father of 2, managed a network of 50 rural cooperatives in 7 states of the Northeast. Claire, his wife, coordinated environmental education programs serving 200 rural schools, teaching children about sustainable agriculture and cooperativism. Sarah had received an honorary doctorate degree from 3 Brazilian universities and 1 Portuguese university in recognition of her contribution to sustainable rural development. But she continued to live in the same simple house in New Village, waking up early to water the plants and talk with the garden staff. For her, success had not changed the essence of who she was, a hard-working woman committed to the community's well-being. During an interview to celebrate her 60th birthday, Sarah was asked about her plans for the future. "Sarah, after building all this, what are your next goals?" "My goal now is to ensure the project continues to prosper in the hands of the next generations. James and Claire are very competent, but I want to be available to guide them whenever they need it. And personally, any dream not yet fulfilled? My dream is to live to see my great-grandchildren grow up in this environment of cooperation and prosperity that we built, and maybe meet some great-great-grandchildren too." The interview moved millions of viewers, especially elderly women who identified with Sarah's journey of overcoming. James, watching the interview alongside his wife and children, commented on the example set by his mother. "Claire, sometimes I think how different it would be if my mother had given up that first day on the road. We'd probably be living a very different life. But she never gave up, and that's why we have all this. I want our children to learn this lesson. Never give up in the face of difficulties." Peter, now 10 years old, listened to his parents' conversation attentively. He was an intelligent and curious child who already showed interest in agriculture and social issues. "Daddy, was Grandma Sarah poor when I was born?" "Not exactly poor, son, but she started life with nothing and built all this through hard work and perseverance. I want to be like her when I grow up." "You can be better than her, Peter. You have educational opportunities and knowledge that she didn't have." The conversation with his grandson made James reflect on the responsibility of keeping the values passed down by Sarah alive. It was essential that the next generations understood the importance of hard work, honesty, and social solidarity. Mrs. Dorothy, at 107 years old, continued to be the family's revered matriarch. Though physically more fragile, she kept a clear mind and actively participated in important family decisions. During a family meeting to discuss expanding the project to other countries, Mrs. Dorothy gave her final piece of advice. "My dears, always remember, it doesn't matter how big the project grows. What's important is to keep your hearts focused on the people who need help." "You're right, Grandma Dorothy," agreed Sarah. "Growth without human values is just empty ambition." The family decided to accept invitations to implement similar projects in 3 Latin American countries, but always respecting local cultures and prioritizing the development of the communities served. 40 years after being expelled from the farm, Sarah was chosen as one of the 100 most influential women of the 21st century by an international magazine. The article highlighted her journey of overcoming and the social impact of her work. But the recognition that moved her the most was a collective letter signed by 2,000 residents of the region, thanking her for the transformation she had brought to their lives. "Mrs. Sarah, you didn't just change our region, you changed our hearts. You taught us that it's possible to prosper without losing our humanity, to grow without forgetting our roots, to succeed without abandoning those who need help. That's why you will always be our heroine and our inspiration." Sarah kept the letter as her most precious treasure, more valuable than all the official awards and recognitions she had received in her lifetime. James, now 40 years old and a recognized leader of the national cooperative movement, continued expanding his mother's legacy with technological innovations and international partnerships. Peter, at 20 years old and an agronomy engineering student, interned at the community garden during university breaks, learning the fundamentals of cooperative work through practice. The youngest, James Jr., at 15, showed a talent for communication and marketing, creating digital content to promote the family cooperative's products and values. Claire coordinated educational programs that served 5,000 children annually, shaping a new generation committed to sustainability and social cooperation. Sarah, at 65, divided her time between mentoring her grandchildren, international consulting, and writing her definitive memoirs, which would be launched as an educational book for rural schools. Mrs. Dorothy, at 112, was probably the oldest person in the state of Oklahoma. Her longevity was attributed by the family to the life purpose she had found in helping build the community project. During an interview for a documentary on longevity, Mrs. Dorothy revealed her life philosophy. "Young lady, I've lived so long because I've always had something to fight for. First I fought to raise my children, then to help my daughter-in-law build a dignified life. Now I fight to see my great-grandchildren grow up on the right path. And what's the secret to being happy in old age? To continue being useful to the people we love. As long as I can contribute something, I'll keep on living." The interview moved geriatric specialists who began studying Mrs. Dorothy's longevity as an example of active and healthy aging. The community garden had become an economic complex that included a preserves factory, a training center, a rural restaurant, an eco-lodge, and a research center for sustainable agriculture. The annual revenue exceeded $50 million, but it continued to be entirely reinvested in social, environmental, and technological improvements. No family member accumulated excessive personal wealth, maintaining the original commitment to the fair distribution of results. Sarah received invitations to run for political office, but always refused. "My work is here, at the grassroots, alongside the people. Politics is important, but it's not my calling." Your son James also declined similar invitations, preferring to continue expanding the cooperative movement through organized civil society. During a ceremony commemorating the project's 40 years, Sarah gave a speech that summarized her life philosophy. "Friends, when I walked down that road 40 years ago with my baby in my arms and no prospects, I never imagined we would build all this. But I learned a fundamental lesson. There are no impossible dreams for those willing to work honestly and never give up. Today I see young people from our community graduated from universities, prosperous families that once struggled, a region that was forgotten and is now a national example. This was only possible because we always prioritized people over profit, cooperation over competition. I hope the next generations keep these values alive, even when I'm no longer here to remind them of the importance of these choices." The speech moved everyone present. Many longtime employees of the garden cried as they remembered the journey shared with Sarah. Peter, now a graduate in agronomic engineering and working as the cooperative's technical coordinator, pledged to uphold the family philosophy. "Grandma Sarah, I promise our generation will take good care of everything you built, and we will do even more. My grandson, you can do much more than I did. You have education, technology, and opportunities I never had. Use that to help even more people." James Jr., now 20 years old, and a social communication student, created a digital foundation to disseminate cooperative methodologies through online platforms, reaching millions of people worldwide. The family had become an international reference in sustainable rural development, but never lost the characteristics of simplicity and closeness with the local community that always distinguished them. 45 years after the expulsion from the farm, Sarah was diagnosed with a heart condition requiring delicate surgery. At 70 years old, she faced the first serious health problem of her life. During preparations for the surgery, Sarah took the opportunity to organize pending family and professional matters. "James, if something happens to me during the surgery, I want you to know I am proud of everything we built together. Don't talk like that, Mum. You will get through this surgery and live many more years. I hope so. But it's important to have everything organized and well arranged. Sarah spent 2 weeks before the surgery, visiting all sectors of the cooperative, talking with old and new employees, recording memories and guidance for the future. The surgery was successful but required a long recovery period. During the 3 months of forced rest, Sarah took the opportunity to write her definitive memoirs, detailing the entire journey from the farm expulsion to the building of the cooperative empire. The book, titled Seeds of Hope, A Journey of Overcoming, was launched simultaneously in Portuguese, Spanish, and English, becoming an international bestseller. During the book launch, Sarah insisted on donating all royalties to an educational foundation offering scholarships to rural youth. This book tells my story, but it is really the story of thousands of people who believed in cooperative work. Therefore, the resources should go back to help others build their own stories of overcoming. Mrs. Dorothy, at 115 years old, continued to follow all important family events. For her daughter-in-law's book launch, she insisted on giving a special interview. Sarah has always been a special woman. Ever since she came into our family, she showed strength and determination that few people have. It doesn't surprise me that she built all this. What do you most admire about Sarah's journey? I admire that she never forgot where she came from. Even with all the success, she remains the same simple, hard-working person she always was. Mrs. Dorothy's interview went viral on social media, inspiring millions with her wisdom and exceptional longevity. Peter, now married and a father to a baby, gradually took on more responsibilities in managing the cooperative, allowing Sarah to dedicate more time to her personal and family life. James Jr. expanded the digital foundation to 15 countries, creating a global platform for exchanging experiences in rural cooperativism. Sarah recovered from surgery and, with renewed energy, returned to work part-time in the garden, dedicating herself especially to mentoring young cooperativists who visited the project seeking knowledge. During a lecture for university students from various countries, Sarah was asked what she considered most important in her journey. "Professor Sarah, what was the most significant moment in your entire journey?" Sarah thought for a few seconds before answering. "There were many significant moments, but if I had to choose one, it would be the day my grandson Peter took his first steps here in the garden, among the plants I helped cultivate. In that moment, I realized I had built not just a prosperous business, but a legacy that would span generations. And what advice would you give to young people who want to follow a similar path?" I would say, start small, but dream big. Work with honesty. Respect the people you live and work with, and never give up in difficult times. Above all, always remember that true success is not measured by how much money we can accumulate, but by how many lives we can transform for the better. The lecture was recorded and made freely available on the internet, viewed by over 5 million people worldwide. 50 years after being expelled from the farm, Sarah celebrated her 75th birthday, surrounded by 6 generations of her family. Mrs. Dorothy had passed away peacefully at 120 years old, becoming the longest-lived person in the documented history of Oklahoma. Mrs. Dorothy's funeral gathered over 10,000 people, including national and international authorities, who came to pay tribute to the matriarch who had helped build one of the world's most successful cooperative projects. Sarah, emotional during the funeral speech, recalled the importance of her mother-in-law in her journey. Mother Dorothy was much more than a mother-in-law to me. She was a mentor, a friend, a partner in every moment. Without her wisdom and support, I would never have been able to build all that we built. Her memory will live forever in every bed of this garden, in every family benefited by our work, in every child who grows up in this community. James, now 55 and a recognized international leader in the cooperative movement, made a commitment to keep his grandmother's memory alive. Grandma Dorothy taught us that wisdom doesn't come from age, but from the ability to learn from experiences and use that learning to help other people. We will honor her memory by continuing this work of social transformation. Peter, at 40 and a father of 3, was leading a network of 800 cooperatives in 15 countries, directly benefiting 500,000 rural families. James Jr., at 35, was coordinating digital educational programs that served 5 million people annually worldwide. The new generation of the family, represented by Sarah's great-grandchildren, was growing up in an environment of prosperity, but always taught about the importance of work, solidarity, and social responsibility. Sarah, even at 75, remained active as an advisor and mentor, considered one of the most influential women in the world in the field of sustainable rural development. During a commemorative interview for her 75th birthday, Sarah reflected on the legacy she was leaving. "Sarah, how would you like to be remembered by future generations?" "I would like to be remembered as a woman who never gave up in the face of difficulties, who always prioritized the common good above personal benefit, and who proved it is possible to build prosperity without losing our humanity." What message would you leave for women who are facing difficult times? I would say to trust in their own strength. Sometimes we think we don't have the capacity to overcome obstacles, but we discover inner resources we never imagined we possessed. And most importantly, seek help when you need it. Excessive pride doesn't solve problems, but honest work and cooperation with others can transform any situation. The interview was translated into 30 languages and distributed free of charge in schools and universities worldwide, used as teaching material in social entrepreneurship and sustainable development courses. At 80, Sarah decided to officially retire from administrative activities, maintaining only a consulting role in the cooperative. The transition was carefully planned to ensure the continuity of the values and methodologies she had developed over 5 decades. James officially assumed the presidency of the global organization, Peter became the international technical director, and James Jr. began coordinating all educational and communication programs. Sarah moved to a smaller house within the community garden complex, where she spent her days tending a personal garden and receiving visitors who came from all over the world, seeking knowledge and inspiration. Despite her advanced age, she kept a sharp mind and continued writing articles about rural cooperativism for international specialized magazines. During one of her last public interviews at 85, Sarah gave a definitive assessment of her journey. "Sarah, what is your greatest pride when looking back?" "My greatest pride is having helped prove that it is possible to build a better world through cooperation and honest work. When I began this journey, over 50 years ago, I was just a desperate widow with no prospects for the future. Today, I see millions of people around the world living better thanks to the cooperative principles we helped spread." And if you could go back in time, would you change anything? "I wouldn't change anything fundamental. All the mistakes I made, all the difficulties I faced were necessary to get to where we are. If I changed anything, perhaps we wouldn't have built all this." What is your greatest hope for the future? My greatest hope is that the next generations continue to refine the values we tried to plant: honest work, mutual respect, social solidarity, and care for the environment. If we achieve that, the world will be a much better place for our descendants. The interview became a historical documentary about the development of the worldwide cooperative movement, preserved as a cultural heritage of humanity. Sarah passed away peacefully at 90 in her home at the community garden, surrounded by family and lifelong friends. Her last words were of gratitude for having lived long enough to see the project prosper beyond her most ambitious dreams. The funeral gathered over 50,000 people from around the world, including heads of state, religious leaders, academics, social entrepreneurs, and most importantly, the simple families who had been benefited by the cooperative work started by Sarah decades before. James, emotional during the funeral eulogy, summarized the legacy left by his mother. "Sarah Mitchell wasn't just my mother. She was a mother to millions of people who found hope and dignity through cooperative work. She proved that an ordinary person, with determination and solid values, can transform the world. Her legacy will live forever in every family that managed to overcome poverty, in every young person who found an opportunity for education, in every community that discovered the strength of unity. The original community garden was transformed into a memorial and pilgrimage center for people interested in seeing the place where one of the most important social movements of the 21st century was born. Peter assumed the global leadership of the organization, implementing technological innovations that allowed the reach of the cooperative programs to expand to over 100 countries. James Jr. created a free digital university that offered courses in rural cooperativism in 50 languages, training 100,000 community leaders annually worldwide. The family maintained the original commitment to reinvest all resources into social and environmental improvements, never accumulating excessive personal wealth. 10 years after Sarah's passing, the cooperative movement inspired by her directly benefited 5 million rural families in 120 countries. The model had been adapted to different cultures and economic realities, but always maintaining the fundamental principles of honest work, fair distribution, and sustainable development. During a commemorative ceremony for the 60th anniversary of the original community garden, Peter gave an emotional speech about his grandmother's legacy. Grandma Sarah always said that true success isn't measured by the amount of money we manage to accumulate, but by the number of lives we manage to change for the better. Today, we know she was right. Millions of people around the world live with more dignity thanks to the values she planted in this blessed land. The ceremony was broadcast live worldwide, watched by over 100 million people who had been directly or indirectly influenced by the work started by Sarah in the small new village of Hope Springs. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story of overcoming and determination. Do you believe Sarah made the right decisions throughout her journey? Leave your comment sharing your opinion and where you are watching from. If this story touched your heart in any way, share your sincere words with us in the comments. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other emotional stories we have prepared for you.